Welcome to the latest episode of Five on the Floor on the Five Reasons Sports Network. Thanks for joining us on your favorite podcast app on Apple Podcasts, on Android, Spotify, or the Five Reasons YouTube channel. We recommend for those of you who don't yet, download us on Spotify. It's a little quicker and it works on both platforms. Also, check out Off the Floor, link right there in the description. It's $2.99 per month. I'm sorry. You can bypass the Apple upcharge by clicking on the link. You get access to 10 different channels, including the draft channel, the transaction channel. We've got all kinds of stuff on there. We're going to be bringing the stage shows back as well as we get closer to the season. You get the host updates from us. Everything that's on Twitter that is interesting, we put there. So this is a place to find it all in one place and talk about it with others without the same 6 accounts dictating everything. So check it out. It's Off the Floor. Link is right there in the description. Also, check out Prize Picks. That's the official fantasy sponsor of the Five Reasons Sports Network. Prize Picks, if you use the code 5, you get $50 to play right away. Prize Picks, you can play it in the state of Florida. Yes, it is legal again, and across the sports spectrum, up to 6 players. Flex Friday, Taco Tuesday, it's all there again. Check it out, prizepicks.com. Use the code FIVE. And now, today's episode.
Mercy, luxurious, Heat Nation, yeah, Mercy and Lago, down to Biscayne, yay, 5 on the floor, ride for my dogs, where here's the thing, you can check the score, hustle hard, couple scars, wearing bubble frogs, down to Biscayne. Kept the floor playing, got it all banned. Y'all seen the block, stop with one hand. And Pat we trust, inspire, have the guts. We're here to bring the heat, y'all can hang it up.
Welcome to Five on the Floor, a daily insider show on the Miami Heat and the NBA, featuring Ethan Skolnick, Greg Sylvander, Alex Toledo, Brady Hawk, and others from the Five Reasons Sports Network. Also, make sure to subscribe to Off the Floor for the most heat anywhere.
All right, welcome back to Five on the Floor. Here's today's floor plan. I'm Ethan Skolnick. You can follow me at Ethan J. Skolnick in the Five Reasons Sports. I got Brady Hawk. You can follow him at Brady Hawk 305. We are close to a Final Four in the NBA for those still paying attention. Waiting on OKC and Denver to finish up. We've got Minnesota advancing to the conference finals for the second straight year behind Anthony Edwards and this time Julius Randle, not Karl Anthony Towns. Jimmy Butler is out. Playoff Jimmy showed up a couple times, but not enough. Not enough without Steph Curry. So he's eliminated just as the Heat are 1 round later. In the Eastern Conference, Indiana has made it through the conference finals for the second straight year. I bet most people were not expecting that. So Indiana and Minnesota, 2 teams that ESPN maybe devoted like 5 minutes to the entire year, other than probably talking about Ant. Those teams are in the conference finals. And awaiting the winner of the Knicks-Boston series, which Jason Tatum is out for the rest of the playoffs and next season with a torn Achilles. But the Celtics won without him, which is something that I probably should have expected. We'll see if the Knicks can finish this thing off or if they choke it away in the next 2 games. But Brady, we're going to talk about in relation to the Heat is if there have been any trends that have emerged in the playoffs that maybe they should take as their team building. And we were going to do a whole episode on this, but I'll just start with it because I know that this is the big one in terms of the direction that the Heat have been going is this idea of playing bigger. And I know that there's been a sense that the league is playing bigger. In general, some of the better lineups in the playoffs have been bigger lineups. But you can't say across the board that all of these are big teams. Minnesota is, yes, Gobert and Randall, Naz Reid, that's a big front court. Gobert hasn't been played off the court in the playoffs quite as much as he was before. You take a look at the other 75. Look, Jokic. You played through Jokic, Aaron Gordon, basically playing the 4 and doing a whole bunch of different things. That's a team that's big at certain positions, but they're not. They're not as big. It's not a huge front line in terms of having Gordon next to Jokic. Yes, Jokic is, but Gordon, again, is about the right size for a typical power forward in the modern NBA. And then you look at OKC with Hartenstein and obviously Chet Holmgren, who plays a little bit differently than a traditional big has. And then in the Eastern Conference, Indiana, Miles Turner, yes. Rest of that team plays kind of small, or they're quicker, a lot of pace, that kind of stuff. And the Knicks, The Knicks have played Towns at 5 most of the year, but by getting Mitch back, he has contributed in the front court and had a lot of good minutes for him in the postseason, and actually given teams some problems. So where are you with this? Is this a full-fledged trend, or is it kind of team to team?
It is kind of team to team because the two Western Conference teams, I mean, play bigger, as you mentioned, like Hartenstein and Chet is kind of the perfect example. Randall and Gobert, but they bring Naz Reid in off the bench. The Knicks, as you mentioned, they have positional size. Like they just obviously have a bunch of wings, and they're going to play their 5 guys the entire game, which is probably another trend we could talk about. Is probably the minute distribution with Miami when they move forward. And then you have Indiana, who doesn't really play big, I wouldn't say, but they just have so much depth that they can use so many different lineups and go to so many different things. The number one trend to me with the big thing is, like, let's use OKC as an example. Like, they're starting with Chet and Hartenstein. They're able to kind of run those lineups. They immediately stagger. So now they're able to kind of run
Right.
Chet at the 5, Hartenstein at the 5, and they're able to get their own lineups, which I think is probably the most important thing with Miami is finding out good, staggering distributions to try to find ways to get lineups with Ware and lineups with Bam. And then here's the big takeaway. They close. Like, that's always going to be the next step. And that's, on Kalel's growth into the next season. That's on Spo trusting the 2 big lineup later in games. And it's all that kind of combined. But I just, you've seen a lot of this stuff where teams don't get away from it late in games. Like, even if, let's say, the Knicks or Pacers are playing smaller, you have to play your game. Yes, there's certain points you have to match up. Like Towns, if he's getting picked on defensively and he has 4 fouls, 5 fouls, like you've seen in the past, like, yes, you have to kind of alternate things. But, like, the ability not to change your game and to stay the course with the 2 big lineup late in games and figure out how to work it. The playoffs is always going to be a series of time when scoring is down, but like the scoring has really been down. It feels like there's been a lot of like 100 games over the course of this second round. And that's kind of the idea here behind the 2 big lineup. That was the idea behind Miami going to it in the first place, was that it kind of, changed their defense and lean in that direction and find ways to do it. So if you're taking Kalel out, or these other teams are taking one of your bigs out and you're going smaller and you're leaning scoring, it's just so much easier for these other teams to pick on you defensively because there's easier matchups to get to. There's smaller guys, the offensive rebound, the second chance points. Like, it's just so much easier to score. So that's kind of the big trend to me with the 2 big thing is just closing. Can they get to a point here where Kalel's growth, the Bam and Kalel's connection, Spo's trust in the lineup, can they consistently close with the 2 bigs?
And you mentioned defense, and so let's go there. Houston, one of the better defensive teams in the league, gave Golden State some problems, but ultimately lost. Minnesota is very good defensively when they're playing their whole group together. The Knicks can be really good defensively with more their wings than with their bigs. The oversized wings that they have, whether it's Bridges' length or Anunoby's just physicality. And then you throw Hart in there. And then you take a look at at OKC. I mean, they do everything defensively. So I think that if the Heat look at this, they're going to say, well, yeah, okay, it starts with defense. But then you also look at Indiana, which has become passable defensively. They were not when Carlisle sort of unveiled this style, but they're still relying primarily on pace. I know you talk about the scoring being down in the playoffs, but is there a case to be made for pace? Because that's something we talk about every offseason, every preseason with the Heat. They never execute that. They're always in the bottom 5. But Indiana and OKC, I mean, they play with pace when they are rolling. Okay, they know how to slow a game down, but they can do that as well. Is there a case to be made that they should be looking at more of that?
Yeah, like the trend is that the younger teams play with pace. I mean, the teams you're mentioning, Indiana, OKC, the Heat are a young team now. Like this is where they are. So it almost feels like I understood it before when we used to talk about them upping pace, and it was like, oh, ultimately it was never going to happen because Jimmy was going to slow things down the half court when they had Kyle. Yes, he had the hit-head passes, but like there was just certain things and trends with the roster that it just didn't make always align. This roster pretty much aligns. Like even the guys they got in toward the end of the season with Wiggins and others, those are guys that like to get out and run. They're athletic. They can play out. This isn't a team made for the half court offense. Like it just isn't. Like they have to find ways to get easier points, especially if you're forcing turnovers. So 100%, can they play faster? I mean, Indiana is is different just because the depth I mentioned. Like when you have 10 playable guys and you have fresh legs at all times, it almost feels like you're more likely to get out and run and you kind of play that style. The Knicks, they kind of play fast at times, but when you're playing 42 minutes, 43 minutes in a game, ultimately it's going to slow down and they're going to get into the half court like they usually do. So it kind of depends on that. It depends on the roster that Miami has at hand. If you're playing bigger, yes, Bam could get out and run, but like now you're kind of playing both sides here. Do you want to get out and run fast, or do you want to play big and bog the game down a little bit? So that's the balance they're going to have to try and figure out. But I do feel like with, if they're leaning into these young guys like Nico and others, like they do have to get out and run, but it starts with the defense. It starts with, forcing turnovers and doing a lot of things that we're seeing these teams in the second round do. So, and probably more than anything, if you do get the turnovers, if you do get out on the break and run the fast break, be able to do it right, like not take pull-up threes early in the clock and do stuff the right way. They've been better at it than they were 2 years ago, but still it has to
still
be
not
as
good.
we cleaned up.
Yeah, still not good enough. All right, on the other side is we're going to talk about specific players, types of players that are leading their team in the playoffs, because there is kind of a trend there, and it's something that I think the Heat have to look seriously at in the draft. Before we talk about, though, if you're drafting a real estate agent, it's Real Estate Shop. Go to realestateshopfl.com. That's 2 P's and an E. Realestateshopfl.com. Amanda, Javier has been on the podcast with us. Huge Miami Heat fans, big in the community. You see them everywhere in Broward County, but they can also sell or buy your house or help you sell or buy your house anywhere in the county. So reach out to them today. They're honest, they're trustworthy, they're just really good people. And again, you see how family oriented they are. They're the kind of people that you want handling what is often a family decision here. So check it out. It's realestateshopfl.com, realestateshopfl.com, or check them out at the Fort Lauderdale Realtor on Instagram and mention that 5 Reasons sent you. All right, so let's look at the types of players that are leading. Now, I'm assuming, look, the Boston situation is what it is, and we don't really know how competitive that series is going to be the rest of the way. Losing Tatum, obviously, is a huge blow. I'm not going to diminish it, even though I haven't been the biggest proponent of Tatum as this like top 5 player, as maybe some have been. But assuming they lose, which I mean, if the Knicks blow this series, this is one of the worst New York collapses of all time. I don't know what Spike Lee will do, honestly. And honestly, on the other side, I don't know what Bill Simmons will do. So it's better not to think about it either way, but they might just burn down the Sbarro. It's going to be ugly. I will say that if they win this series, there's going to be a lot of talk about how you can win big with a small guard. Because remember, this was a conversation. Even Becky Hammond got involved in this a couple of years ago. You can't win with a small guard as your best player. And the reality is, it hasn't happened very often. Isaiah Thomas with the Pistons, probably the best example. Great team around him, but obviously a Hall of Fame player. He was their engine. And I guess Iverson never won. He did get to the finals. I guess Dwayne. I mean, everybody forgets that Dwayne really standing without shoes was 6'2.5", not the 6'4" that he got quoted as. Donovan Mitchell couldn't take his team past this round. They lost in 5 games, even though obviously he had some big scoring nights. But we see Brunson, and then a taller player, but another guard, Halliburton, who's also the best player on his team. And they're likely going to meet in the Eastern Conference Finals. And then you look out west. I mean, Shea is not a small guard, but he's clearly their best player. Obviously he's their lead guard. He's the guy who's got the ball in his hands most of the time. And on the other side, Ant, obviously a little bit of a bigger guard than that, more of a traditional 2 like Dwayne. But it does seem, even as we're talking to the bigs, that like the guards are leading, right? So what does this mean for the Heat?
It's funny because I go back to something Tyler said at the end of the season where he was like, said one of the biggest surprises was like the credit of like closing games and how hard it was to close games. All those guys you mentioned have closed games in the playoffs this season consistently. I mean, the games Brunson has put up to close games, like the game winners from Halliburton, Anthony Edwards, and Shea as well. All those guys have closed out games with ease. Like they could put games away. Tyler's done it in the past, obviously. Like he's a big shot maker. He loves the moment and everything. But even he mentioned when you are the number 1 option and you're in that point of the game, it's a lot tougher. Like when everybody knows Tyler Hero is getting the basketball on the inbound for the potential game winner and they hedge over and double over. And now he's got to figure out if he has to take a shot over 2 or 1 pass away. That's stuff he has to figure out. This is all new to him. So I'd say one of the biggest takeaways with like the small guards leading the way, or just guards in general, is like dealing with being the number one option. And I guess the case is here. Are Heat fans preparing for Tyler Hero to kind of be that guy and be the number one option, or is there, somebody that's going to take the reins there and put him in the spot that he probably is better off being in? So, I mean, this portion of it's tough because, like, of course, anybody's going to want an Anthony Edwards type. Anybody wants a Shea type, but it's just not easy to get to that point. You can get an aging version of that, as you mentioned in the Pat Riley press conference, and like a Kevin Durant who can be that guy closing games. It could be a legit number one for the time being. But this does seem, I mean, look, as much as we say like the Kevin Durant thing and the aging thing and all that stuff, a lot of the guys that are aging and the guys from the past are getting knocked out early. I mean, this is a young guys league right now. Like, this is all the guys you mentioned: Shea, Anthony Edwards, Jalen Brunson, and Tyrese Halliburton are some of the guys you're mentioning. And these guys like Steph getting injured in the playoffs, LeBron, got knocked out early, but also got injured right before he ended up getting knocked out. He said he probably wouldn't have played the next game. This is the downside to making that type of move. So, like, this is the case they're in, where you're kind of, is the Miami Heat watching this type of stuff and seeing the trend and saying, okay, maybe it is time to really retool and go young and try to move forward to the next portion of this tenure, because it feels like the league is really progressing right now.
Well, and also it shows you get these guys in different ways, right? Ant was the number one overall pick of the draft, never would have been in Minnesota otherwise. Shea was drafted in the back end of the lottery by the Clippers and then traded along with 75 other assets for Paul George. Brunson was a guy that Dallas kind of found, had great chemistry with Luka, decided not to offer him the extension that he wanted, and New York made him an offer that at the time seemed like too much. It turned out to be a brilliant deal. You mentioned him in the clutch. He's got like more clutch points than like everybody else combined this year. Like, it is insane. Like, everybody knows he's getting the ball there. What he's going to do, he does it anyway. It really, I mean, he's been the MVP of the playoffs to me in terms of the finishing, like, which is what matters the most. And then you look at Halliburton, also traded. So, I mean, you got three of those guys aren't even on their first team: Shea, Halliburton, and Brunson. And Halliburton was traded for Indiana's best player at the time, which was Sabonis, basically because the Kings had 2 point guards and now they have none, which was Halliburton and Fox. So I think that you can take a lot of different things out of how you find it, but you have to find somebody to close. I think that's clear, and you're right. And it appears that it doesn't have to be one of these forwards. Look, Kawhi got himself healthy, but got bounced, right? Harden, we know, obviously always flops at the end of the playoffs, did again. But you're talking about some of these traditional guys. Paul George hurt all year out of the playoffs. Jimmy bounced second round without Steph. Some of these wings, okay, who have been sort of the elite wings, and you mentioned Bron, not really the focus right now. Something else to consider about with Durant, it seems to be the guys who are supposed to have the ball in their hands most of the time. The guys in the backcourt who are making decisions at the end of games. You mentioned they're younger and quicker. Halliburton doesn't play that way, but he gets to all of his spots. And so, yeah, I mean, I think these are trends that you can look at, and then you say, well, okay, is Kevin Durant at age 36 or 37 the closer that you want? He's just better than anything else Miami could find by far, and would be, if healthy, a top 10, maybe top 5 player still in the Eastern Conference, because we know how weak the East is. I guess overall, as I look at this, the one other point to make here is that, and again, people say I'm trolling, I'm carrying more of the front office. A lot of the expensive teams are out. Indiana is not top 20 in payroll. Minnesota is, but Minnesota made a cost-cutting trade. They traded that major reason they traded Towns for DiVincenzo and Randall was because they were so far into the luxury tax. So they were pulling themselves back a little bit. But again, Indiana's not an expensive team. The Knicks, yes, they have a lot due on the books coming forward, but they actually have a pretty balanced payroll at the top. And again, part of that is because Brunson took less money, which is something that's certainly helpful. But look, the Celtics, the Suns didn't make the playoffs. The Celtics, as expensive as they are, the Sixers, and the Celtics, again, a lot of this is caused by Tatum's situation. But even Cleveland's great regular season did not have a high payroll. So I do think there is a case to be made here that if you do the right things in the modern CBA, if you balance your roster, if you find a guard who can lead and close, and then you have some size to go with it, you have a chance. Yeah, and I don't think there's a cookie cutter way of doing this. But just, I'm not saying you don't spend if you need to, but just throwing money at it doesn't seem to be the only way to go. All right, Brady, final thoughts on the playoffs. And let me just ask you this. As you look at the teams that are left, who wins? Who's going to win the title?
Ooh. I'd probably still go with the front runner with OKC just in this moment, just because it is about being hot at the right time. But I do kind of just feel like they have it. I mean, that Western Conference Finals is going to be crazy. I mean, and it's not over yet. Denver could win tonight and then force a game 7 and things get really interesting. I'll say my final takeaways is the role players and the other guys on the outside. Like, we're so focused on the Kevin Durant, the Giannis Antetokounmpo, even the Tyler Hero, the Bam Adebayo. But I feel like the role players are so much more important than we probably are giving them credit for. Like Miami, yes, they had good seasons from some of their young guys. Davion Mitchell was kind of the bright spot of this season. All of that aside, I'm just looking at like team like Indiana. I'm looking at a team like Minnesota who has these outer pieces that just make sense for their roster. And it just felt like a lot of this season was Miami, just like we talked about all year. It was like a revolving door of a rotation. Like you just kind of were just throwing pieces out there and just trying to see what sticks. These other teams that are in the mix right now aren't doing that. These pieces on the outside of their main guys fit like a glove. Like they just make sense. They have the ability to be flexible with their lineups. So maybe if there isn't a focus, like I go back to when Pat was asked, will there be big changes? And he said, the first thing he said was no. Like, there's probably not going to be big changes. I mean, I don't expect there to be. Like, that's just the way things are going with this team as of late. But that doesn't mean there won't be changes. So I wonder what that exactly looks like. Does that look like, not that they have to go contender status with their role players, but like if there is a soft retool, if they're re-upping for the future, can they get, not only some young guys, but look at a lot of these teams. Like they have some savvy vets, like a Mike Conley, like just like a lot of these different guys in the mix that I just feel like the role players are kind of be a focus, like not going out there and signing, Burks or Kyle Anderson on the minimum type role players, like guys that you can, take a swing on. Like you just mentioned some young guys you could even take a swing on. I mean, they did that with Davion Mitchell. Look how that turned out. Look how these, these swings that they took on guys like, Halliburton or Shea in these trades that were just kind of filler young pieces, and look what they turned into. So I feel like maybe it isn't always about the big swing. Maybe they can get some of these higher upside scouting type swings and just, keep building for the future, because it feels like that's where they're heading.
To that end, you got to figure out what your core is first. It's very hard to fit pieces around a core that you don't know what it is. And they've got to settle on that. I mean, if it's Bam and Tyler, I think there's limited upside there, but at least, okay, then you know what it is. And then it's like, who are going to fit best around those players? That's kind of the way they tried to build around Jimmy. They found, for all the criticism of them, they found these undrafted guys who fit very well next to him, who he respected, by the way. I mean, all the talk afterwards, but the players he respected most on the team at the time were guys like Strus and Vincent and Caleb. And, and he was unhappy about guys not being re-signed. But again, these were all Heat success stories, but they were players who had a skill set that matched his. The Heat now have to find others who match. Davion fits with anybody, I think. So I don't think that's a problem. But some of these other guys, they're going to have to sort it out. You can see, like, even with Jovic, like, I like the player. Where's the fit? Like, what is he going to fit around this group? How is he going to provide scoring punch off the bench, ball in his hands? We've talked about all of it, but they have to settle on who the core is going to be first, and then it's like, okay, let's add the pieces to it. And they've traditionally been very good at that. I think the problem is that the core kind of cracked under their feet a little bit. And with Jimmy's age, Tyler's lack of availability for a little while, Bam's sort of lack of development offensively, like it's like, okay, then what? And that's, I think that they have to decide sort of what this is going to be. All right, thanks to our sponsors. We always appreciate Real Estate Shop. You can find them at realestateshopfl.com. You can find Brady at Brady Hawk 305. Prize Picks, use that code 5 FIVE, and Off the Floor, sign up with the description, the link right there in the description. Have a good one, everybody.